Hello everyone and welcome to another video on Python programming. In this video we will be taking an introduction into the concept of generators. So Python provides a generator which is like a function where we can create our own iterator. In a generator function we use the yield statement instead of the return statement that we use for standard functions. So let's look at a simple generator first of all. So out here I have defined a generator called my generator, where I'm doing there are three functions or three tasks that I'm doing. First one is when I'm printing the first item and I'm yielding a value 10. Then I'm printing second item yielding 20. Then I'm printing last item yielding 30. So let's see how do we use this. Now, since we know my generator is the function, it uses the yield keyword. Every time we use the next keyword, we will keep getting what is next in this function. So let's store the generator in myGen. So now we have stored the iterator in this function variable called gen or gen. Now let's see, when we do next and we use gen, what happens? So the first task is performed, or the first iteration is performed, where we get this, the first yield command is done. Alright, let's see what happens when we do next again. Next gen. Now, as you can see, we get second item and we get 20. Let's do it for the next, let's do it once more, since there is one more task, there's one more iterable inside. You can see this. Now a valid question is, what will happen if we do next gen again, since there is nothing after this? Well, let's see what happens. We should get an error. As you can see, stop iteration error. This is another built-in exception that happens when we have reached the last object of an iterable. So we get a stop iteration error. So now a key difference between a generator and a function is that when we execute a function, the moment we hit the return statement in a function, or when we execute a function, like whatever variables that were stored inside are lost and they're destroyed unless they were defined as global, and the function is completely done executing and we leave the function completely. Whereas when it comes to a generator, when we hit the yield function, we don't actually completely leave this function. So the first time the yield is found, we get 10, but the generator remembers its position inside this function. So the next time we use the next, we actually move on to the next iterable, and then we move on to the next iterable. So you can think of a generator as it sort of has memory, if that makes sense. It's a way to create iterables in Python or create iterators in Python. So to understand what the difference between the yield command and the return command does, let's take the same function. Alright, and let's put a return over here after this particular, the second yield. Okay, let's do the same thing. We say gen is equal to my generator, and let's start doing next gen and seeing what's there. So the first yield will be standard, first item 10. The next one is going to say second item and then 20. But now if you notice, there was a return I put over here. So technically when I did the second next, it's not only yielded 20, but it's also executed this return function or this return statement. So let's see what happens if I do next again. As you see, I have gotten the stop iteration seemingly earlier than I did before. And that's because I have used the return function and return statement. And what that's done is that we've completely left this function, so as to speak, and there is nothing next, so as to speak. So we get the stop iteration, and that's the difference between yield and return. Now in the next example, I'm going to show you how we use a generator function in place of the for loop, or for a for loop. So let's take this, what I have over here, and I have defined a function called getSequence up to x, and what this will do is basically it will keep printing the printing numbers up until whatever we have entered in place of x over here. So if I said, say, sequence is equal to, let's copy this, All right. And say I want sequentially, I want every number up until 10. Well, not including 10, of course, because Python starts with 0, right? So let's do this. And now let's see. So the first number will yield 0. And now if I did this again, it should give me 1, 2. And I can keep going until I will stop at the value 9, as you can see here. So 8, 9. Now I should get the stop iteration error, because that we have reached the end of our iteration. So this is a way of using generator functions for for loops. So another neat example where we're going to use a generator is in the case of Fibonacci numbers. So let's use it. Let's see how we can generate a Fibonacci series using generator. So I've defined a Fibonacci function called Fibonacci where I'm passing max. So max is basically the max value that I want, like up until where I want the sequence, right? So this is basically the code which will return me the subsequent values of my Fibonacci sequence. So let's pass this to fib and say I want all the Fibonacci numbers until 10. So I will pass 10 over here. Let's see what happens when we do next fib. Well, it should start with 0. Then when we do this again, we get 1. Then we do 0 plus 1. It should be 1. Next number should be 1 plus 1, which is 2. Then we should have 2 plus 1, 3. And then 3 plus 2, 5. Then 3 plus 5 should be 8. Now 8 plus 5 is 13. And since 13 is greater than what we passed for our max value here, now when we try this, we should get the stop iteration error, as you can see. So yeah, this was a brief video into generators in Python and how we can use generators to create our own iterator function. So of course, it's very important to note that generator functions use the yield statement instead of the return statement, and that's how we differentiate a standard function from a generator function. Once again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do like, do subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.